Okay, creating variables in REDCap. redcap.health.usf.edu. You will log in. I'm automatically logged in. Once you log in, you select projects. You select the project that you are working on. For us, that's CAP norms. You'll see it already has 37 records entered. There are 41 fields for this project, and they are all on one form. Okay, so current users for this project include myself, Doctors Edwards, Lister, and personnel from the Cognitive Aging Lab. To modify the project, select Designer. What I have done is I have created a new form for the measures that will be added. So you can change the name of this to something more suitable by selecting this pencil. So once you change your name and you add your fields, your number here will change. In addition, you can also print out your database or your project form as a PDF. So the PDF version of this project is here. So the person entering data for this study, once it's all entered, it populates here, and we can print it out as a PDF, which we eventually will get to. Maybe we can discuss that at a later date. Anyhow, back to the task at hand. Okay, so click on your form here, your instrument name, and then now you'll be able to add your fields. So I recommend building your instrument based on how the original form looks. A good example of this would be the demographics form that we use in the Cognitive Aging Lab. What I did was, when I created the original instrument, I mirrored the same items and in the same order in the instrument on REDCap as was in the paper hard copy. So that is my recommendation to you both. Try to get or at least use the original form as a guide for building your form online. It's really helpful. So with that being said, there are lots of different ways that you can build this. So there are different field types. So for example, if you wanted to ask a person a specific question about a date, or you wanted to enter specific information about a date, you can just select that item. So text box that's appropriate for short text, number, date, and time. And you would just type in the field label. So the field label is what shows up on the interface. So it's essentially what the person entering data or the person operating the tool will see. And you can, if you want to get, fancy and sophisticated, you can enable your rich text editor, and you can change some things around if you like. It's up to you once you get a handle on everything. If you want to go back and, make some aesthetic changes, feel free. So you would enter the field label, decide whether or not you want to enable rich text editor and do any adjustments. You also need to include the variable name. So the way that I label variables, and I think that this might be consistent across the Cognitive Aging Lab and the NOAA Lab, whenever I'm collecting data on at a baseline visit, so the very, very first visit, I denote that using a 0. And then I denote other visits with 1, 2, 3, 4 to kind of keep track of the different dates and so that I can use their significance in my data analysis at a later date. Anyhow, so that being said, so you want to create your variable name. So here you would enter, for your variable name, you could say date. And so since I've already used date the first time, I've already used it in the prior instrument, the CAP norms instrument. So this would be date 2. And what we can do here, so validation, it's a month, day, year. So here you can select whether it will certainly help in drafting how the item appears. So you can select month, day, year. You can give minimums and maximums if you like. I think that's a way of kind of minimizing error. You can indicate whether or not the field is required. I'm going to say yes. Is it an identifier? So is this something that lets anybody else know who this participant is, like their name? And the answer to that is no. Field note. So this is a text that will appear underneath the field entry spot to kind of help describe what this is. So I will put here date of date of additional knowable measure. So that is a further identification of what this variable is. Okay, so we can save that. Okay, so we've got your date listed. So that's what shows up on your end. So as you continue to build your date, your project, or your instrument, you can preview it to see what the user, who is not you, looks like and how it operates. Let's see here, add field. Another item you might want to consider that I'm going to show you 2 more things because I think you might come across these pretty often depending on the kind of form you have. So a multiple choice with a single answer. So the field label, this is a practice. Well, I guess I probably, let's be a little bit more creative. Do you have here? This is actually a really good question. Have history of hearing loss. Okay, so since, so that's clearly a yes or no question. Okay, so this is a kind of question where, another note, when you label your variable names, try to label them in a meaningful way. Of course, we can't have really long variable names, but try to label them so that another person can potentially figure out what it means. It's also good to, well, this is actually a really good example. So if this field item is, does anyone in your family have history of hearing loss? I would label this variable history, HX, hearing loss, HL. And if I was going to collect this question multiple times, then I would put a 0 there. But to let me know this is the first time I'm collecting it. But since I'm only going to ask this question once, at least in this brief scenario, I'm not going to give it any kind of number. Is this required? Yes. I usually select yes for every item because it makes it so that data doesn't get skipped. So if there is an item that is marked as required, it will not let you submit the record for entry unless all of the required items are filled. So I would just consider that also. So I make everything required. I mean, there can be some instances where you don't need to, but that's just my reasoning for doing so. Is this an identifier? No. So in this question though, let's think about, okay, so what if this person answers yes or no? We could potentially have a follow-up question. So when you select field type yes or no, it already decides on the choices for you, so you don't have to denote this. I'll show you in a second how you would, because there are some instances where the choices are not generated. So in this instance, we have a true false, a yes no question, but there's a follow-up question where we want to know who in their family had hearing loss. So if you wanted to put another field note here, you could, hearing loss item or what have you. Okay, so now we've got this question, does anyone in your family have history of hearing loss? So we're gonna add another field, and it's gonna be the follow-up to that question. So it's going to say, we're going to do drop down. We're gonna do check boxes, multiple answers. So we're gonna say, this is gonna be the follow-up to that previous question. If so, okay. So this variable name, we're gonna do, okay. So we're gonna denote this history of hearing loss. We could do that. We could call it history of hearing loss fam. So so who in the family had history of hearing loss, or you could do history of hearing loss 2. I would prefer not to do that, but again, variable naming is kind of a personal preference. So I will say that in REDCap, it doesn't like underscores or capital letters. I believe everything needs to be lowercase. Just keep that in mind. So again, this is going to be required. Is an identifier? No. Field note. Okay. So we're going to give the person options. So you have to indicate a value. So 1 would denote, let's say, mother. 2 would denote father. 3 would denote brother. 4 would denote sister. 5 would denote grandparent. Okay. Actually, here, we can actually get here. Okay, so now you have identified all of your choices, and you have given each choice a value. This is helpful when it comes to statistics. It keeps all of your data very, very organized. Okay, so another thing I want to point out, if you were creating if you were adding a field type and you were using something that had similar choices to what you'd already used, you don't have to repeat them. You could select copy existing choices and find them. So if I wanted to use some choices that I'd already selected or input so that I wouldn't have to add them again, you can just select copy existing choices, find whatever choice you want, and then hit use, and then that's that. That's a really nice tool. Okay, so we're gonna hit save. Okay, so you'll remember that this question, this item, is a follow-up to this item. So we need some kind of logic, because not everybody, we need some kind of logic to get from here to here, because not every person will select yes to this, which means not every person will have to answer this item. All right, this is kind of fun. All right, so just because I like uniformity. All right. So let's see here. Now, this is the item that we want to appear only sometimes. So to create the logic, we'll select this branching icon. And then we want to show the field only if so the variable actually, so you can do this one of two ways. You can type your logic in here. I believe the variable name was history hearing loss equals 1. Ooh, oh, yeah. Okay, so history, so when you create your logic, the variable name always has to be in these brackets. And then there needs to be an equal sign and then your value. So in the variable history hearing loss, I believe that 1 was yes and 0 was no. So in that case, when history hearing loss equals 1, that's when we want this additional history hearing loss family item to appear. So so once you've got your logic here and you see this valid sign, you'll select update and close editor. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Again, I'm not sure if 1 is correct or if 0 is correct, but I mean, we could figure it out, right? If it didn't, branch the way that we planned to, we'll just come back and change the logic. So that's not the biggest deal in the world, but it's, it does take a little extra time to go back and check and confirm. So if you're not sure about your variables and what value you want them to be in order to get your subsequent item to appear, what you can do is this. So clear your logic, select drag and drop logic builder. So we're wanting here history of hearing loss. If the person says yes, I do have history of hearing loss, oh, look at that, we were right. We want to drag that over, and this field will show only if this is true. So you can modify this, of course, based on how you want your logic to flow, but that is a really nice tool to have. So then you'll hit save. All right, so now we've created some variables. We have some questions. We've got some logic. So now let's have a look and see what it looks like. So we're going to preview the instrument. So we would enter the date. Does anyone in your family have a history of hearing loss? If so, please denote. So this just lets you see what it looks like. Let's go and see really quick if it works. Add new record. Okay, well this is a good test. So I wanted to show you this anyway, Kelly. So this is how to enter data. So I'm going to test this with you, and then I'm just going to go back later on and delete this fake participant. So you enter the participant ID, the date of the test visit, testing completed by. So Kelly, now that I've shown you how to modify and variables, you can go ahead now and add yourself to this list. So then you'll select date of birth, you'll indicate male or female. Oh, okay. And then their ethnicity, race, pretty self-explanatory, pure tone thresholds. Okay, so you can just tab through this. That's how I'm doing that. time compressed speech. I did really well. Words and noise test, my mean SNR, I don't know. Can't you get negatives on that test? Let's say 0. Oh no. Okay, so good. So that's one reason to set the format of the data so that you can't get answers that are incorrect. It's another way to check people along the way. So what did that error say? So apparently the answer is in a decimal form, which now that I'm saying that, I remember the form, because on the win, I believe that you administer the top portion and the bottom portion, and I think you take the average of those two, right? So then you've got your dichotic digits test. I did really well. I did really great. My hearing is perfecto. My CAP is on point. And 30. Have you taken this test recently in the last 12 months? No. Missing just denotes that if you were, for some reason, did not collect this data for the person, like if you forgot to ask or you were unable to get a hold of them to confirm, you could just, in that case, select missing. Date entered by, Kelly, you can add yourself here. And then once you're done entering the data, you'll select unverified. And what you can do is you can hit save and stay. If you can do that if you wanted to continue working on the form, or you could do save and exit form. Okay, so that's how you enter data for that instrument. So now let's go back to